Facebook viewers and Zoom viewers. We'll kind of pull it all together and give people just a second or two to kind of tune in and come on board. We've got some great information for everybody this morning. So I want to make sure that everybody's tuned in and ready to go. Good morning. We're back here again on our Coffee Talk Tuesday. And last week we had a really great discussion about social interaction for kids and what are we doing to ensure that our kids are involved and having that social interaction that they may be craving or that they may be needed, and some of the struggles that come along with that. And so after our broadcast last week, we all kind of got together and talked about how great it would be to have some additional experts on our panel for this week to talk about some additional strategies and ways to do things. So we're very fortunate to start a series on social interaction, continuing our discussion on social interaction. And we're going to start talking about strategies for elementary school kids this morning. And we're so lucky to have our wonderful additional expert panelists this morning. We have Tiia Fisher, who is our very own special education teacher at the IPPI Learning Academy. And we have Christina Fricano, who is our very own speech and language pathologist at the IPPI Learning Academy. And they each have a very unique perspective on how we can work with kids during this time and different strategies that they're using. So I don't want to waste any more time talking about it. We're really excited to have them here. All of us are. And so let's get started. Katie, I think you have a couple of questions that you were itching to ask Tiia about this.
Sure was. Thanks, Liz. Tiia, I've observed some great things going on in your classrooms. So for those teachers listening in, how would you go about setting up group interaction sessions with students in distance learning, especially those ones who have some social interaction difficulties?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple tips that I would say to kind of look towards when you're setting up social interactions in your groups. So the first thing I would say, I know Katie, you mentioned it last week, is the first thing is definitely start with small groups. Whatever that looks like for you, if you have a full classroom of 20 kids, maybe you're able to start with 5 kids. If you have a smaller cohort like I do, I'm able to set up, 2 or 3 kids in a group together. Sometimes I'll set up also even just 2 teachers if you're able to, and a student, so that they can practice as well together. So it really depends on what your students' needs are and what you're able to facilitate with your group. The second thing I would say is definitely pair them based on their needs. So if, just like you would in the classroom. So sometimes if you pair maybe a higher learner with a lower learner, maybe you pair a student who has stronger conversational skills with someone who has maybe a little bit less, so they can model with each other. Or if you know that there's 2 students that are working on the same social skills, maybe you can pair them together. So kind of look at the groups that you have and put them together based on what works for you. The next thing, which I know you guys talked about well last week, is start with really small and short interactions. So you're not going to kind of go in there right off the bat saying, all right, we're going to sit down for 30 minutes and talk about our favorite toys and what we like to do after school. Maybe you just start with 5 minutes in the beginning of the group or in the end, or even if it's just, a quick hello and goodbye for some of your students if they haven't really been participating that much in distance learning. But keep the expectations really small and really short. So really going in there, every kid is going to have a different expectation for how long they're going to be able to participate and how much they're going to actually be there. And then the last one I would say is definitely be ready with some sort of structure. So you want to go in there, and students aren't, even I'm not used to all the time having conversations this way. I'm like, I'll sometimes myself, okay, what am I going in to talk about, or what am I going to say to my friends? So kind of go in there with a lower expectation of maybe they don't know how to greet each other this way, or maybe they don't know how to share what they did after school. So go in ready with some sort of, topic structure that you're going to have. So maybe it's a group game that you're all going to play together that you used to play in the classroom, so they're familiar with it. Or maybe it's a topic that they all like to talk about. Like my guys like to talk about superheroes. So a lot of the times I'm asking, did you see this movie, or what's your favorite superhero? Things like that. And they're just going to be much more likely to participate. And it's also easier for you than kind of just waiting there to see if they're going to say anything. So those are kind of just some things that I would think about.
So you brought up a great point about lowering expectations, especially in looking at the quantity of the time and the number of social interactions. What about the quality of the social interaction? You know, at school, we work very hard at looking at the quality and improving the quality of social interactions between kids. And Liz, a couple of weeks ago, was talking about how her daughter was doing a Zoom call. They were just basically parallel playing. They were just drawing via Zoom. What do you think that we should be focusing on during this time when we're looking at social interactions with our kids?
Yeah, I think for me too, I think about this all the time. Where at school, I know that I can have, you know, a little bit higher expectations, but now that we're in this format, I'm constantly telling myself, okay, there are certain things that I need to let go of, or I can't stress so much about. And things like, you know, the younger kids might not be perfectly sitting in the camera. So sometimes I might have like a kid's forehead, or they might be, I know one kid is streaming me on their TV, but then I'm also looking at them here. So I'm looking in the lesson and they're like this. And I just, I know they're still paying attention to me. I'm going to keep going with my lesson. You know, they might be talking over each other. So today, actually just this morning, one of my kids discovered the mute button. So he thinks it's really funny to mute himself and then try and say something, and then mute himself and then try and say something. So like, rather than kind of getting stressed out about it, we turned it into like a fun game. Like, oh, like, can you realize, like, let's see if you can figure out the sentence I'm saying. Let's play with this mute button really quickly. And then, you know, once he played around with it for a little bit, I was able to say, like, all right, let's get into our lesson now. You know, getting up and leaving the area, there's so many more distractions around them. So, you know, they might have their cat, or they might be finishing breakfast, or, you know, they might not always remember they have to use the bathroom or something. So, you know, if they're getting up and wandering away for a second, I'll have to be like, okay, you know, it's okay. They'll be back probably. So don't worry about all of that. I think it's great. And I know, Christina, you're going to talk about expectations a little bit. So it's always important to set the expectations. So I'll always, you know, say, okay, try and stay in your area. Or, you know, if you want to talk, it might be easier if everybody mutes themselves so we can hear everyone. But I don't stress about it if the expectations aren't always followed through on, because every kid is different. So like you're saying, really meeting them where they are. So there's a student that hasn't talked in a group for, you know, 5 days or whatever, and they come into my group and they have something cool with them, or they have a toy that they're kind of putting in the screen here. I might try and use that as like an opportunity to say, oh, cool, what do you have today? It looks like you have a new superhero toy or whatever it is. And most of the time they really might just want to share it. So if the lesson kind of gets off on a tangent, or I don't get to cover everything I want to, I really try and focus more on, okay, this is a student who hasn't had an opportunity to speak to everyone, look like they want to. I'm going to pause, take a second, let them interact, and I'll kind of get back to what I was working on. So really, like you were saying, the expectations, I definitely lower them. I meet the kids where they are. So if they're able to carry on a conversation, I think that's great. If they're able to just sit where they are and look at us, I think that's awesome. Sometimes it's just a feat to know that, you know, they logged in and they wanted to see everyone.
And so Tiia, you're talking about these strategies, and you know, really with the focus of your distance learning in your classroom and how you're teaching your kids. But these strategies are same kind of strategies that parents can use with their kids if they're trying to help facilitate social interactions with their kids at home, right? Are there any additional tidbits that you might say to parents who are trying themselves on top of kind of the distance learning that they're getting at school, if they're trying to increase the social interactions at home with some of the kids? What is there anything additional, or are these the strategies really that parents can use as well?
I think just like you're saying, it's exactly, these are the things that parents can be doing as well. So I always really actually enjoy, if there is a parent nearby in the lesson, I'll try and take that as an opportunity to kind of, if they're watching my lesson, almost like modeling for them, like so that they can see the things that we're doing. And then maybe, I know I have weekly meetings with my parents, so I might say, hey, I know you sat in on that lesson earlier. And I'll say, like, yeah, he looked like he didn't really want to participate that much, but it was okay for me because he still stayed logged in. And then, you know, 5 minutes later, he kind of chimed in and said something. And I might take it as an opportunity to say, is this something you're seeing at home too? You know, what are the opportunities that they have outside? And if they don't, you know, if they're only really having social opportunities when they're with us in the distance learning, I might try and provide them with some other opportunities or things, or I might, what are the siblings, what does it look like with their siblings, and see kind of what kind of interactions they are getting. And also, the same exact thing, just like you're saying, what I'm doing in my classroom or what I'm doing distance learning is absolutely, they're good tools that parents can use as well.
Tiia, before we kind of jump into Christina, can you just share 2 or 3 of like the favorite activities that your kids have done that you've kind of come up with?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I think is the most important is like keeping a consistent schedule for them. So especially for those kids that are a little bit more wary to come in for these social interactions, the more they're familiar with it and they know what they're expecting, what to expect, they're, I think, more likely to participate in it. So right in the morning, right off the bat, we always have, structured greetings of, I greet everyone on the screen. And I give them an opportunity to say hello back. And then everyone else also has an opportunity to say hello or whatever it is. So hi, good morning, how are you? And if that takes up the whole slot that I have for my morning meeting, then I don't mind. I'm actually really excited when, new kids raise their hand to participate, to say hello to everybody. The other one that you guys were talking about a lot too is I'll often model how I'm feeling that day in like social context. So I work a lot with Dr. Dobie, and I'll say, good morning, everybody. And we'll do a quick check-in, and we use the zones. So I'll say, I'm feeling a little bit in the blue zone today. I'm definitely feeling sad because, this is supposed to be, whatever it is. So it's Friday and we're supposed to have fun Friday together and we're not in the classroom. So I'm definitely really sad about that. And then I'll try and give them an opportunity too, to kind of express themselves as well, and then see what conversation comes from that. Some other things I've done is, writing letters to them at their house, encouraging other students from other classrooms, if you're able to come on in to kind of speak with them. I often think about how they don't have the same transition times like they normally do in school. So all of these like social times that they normally would have, like transitioning from art to music, or, putting away their math things, those are all times that they usually probably talk to each other and they don't really have it. So, a couple minutes before a lesson or after, I'll try and leave my camera open and say, like, if you want to keep talking, it's okay, and give them that transition time. And the other biggest one that I probably am doing is every day during lunch, show and tell. So either the kids can do their own show and tell, or I'll bring in staff that I know that they really have enjoyed before, to talk to them about it. And I'll always prep the staff beforehand, you might bring 3 facts, or you might want to bring a photo, and kind of give them like some social skills to also let the staff know the expectations for my kids. So I might tell them, if they're muting other kids, it's okay. Don't worry about that. Just keep going with the show and tell. I do, scavenger hunts, virtual field trips, and all of those things. And then I'd say, another piece like we were talking about with the parents is I'll try and communicate with the parents to see what they have going on at home, and if there's anything that I can help them to facilitate. So emailing them if there's going to be some sort of a virtual field trip, or I know, Katie, you do Mystery Doug with your students too, and he has a live one coming up. So I'm shooting that over to my parents to say, okay, this is cool. You can do that with all of your kids. So that might be a social time that you can include all of the siblings in, not just your student. So
that's great. Thank you, Tiia. I think one of the things that we talked about last week, and even listening to you talk, I kept bringing through my mind, is this idea of, sometimes this can get a lot more complicated when you have kids who are a variety of communication levels, right? So how can you best provide experiences for these kids, or have these interactions with kids when you may not know how to engage them, or because they're on such different levels. Chrissy, I know when we were talking earlier, you had some questions for Christina specifically about that.
Yeah, and exactly to that point, Christina, you bring such a great set of expertise to this conversation when we're talking. It's all about communication. It's all about language. So to Liz's point, when we are working with students or even our own children at home who have such a variety of skill levels when it comes to social communication, what are some ways that we can incorporate some of these strategies with kids, with those varying degrees of skills?
I think when you think about the kids that are going to have the most difficulty kind of engaging in those video chats, I think what we're looking at are kind of these three different groups, right? We've got this group of kids that maybe have receptive and expressive language deficits. So that means they have trouble understanding language, or they might have trouble expressing themselves through language. And those kids, you're going to want to, like Tiia said, like use a lot of structured activities and kind of be a little bit more planful about it, because then you can do a little bit of pre-teaching at home. And I know nobody has like tons and tons of extra time, especially as like a working parent. You're probably not like making up flashcards to go with the vocabulary for the lesson. But even taking like 5 minutes before you go on video chat and saying like, all right, we're gonna watch Mystery Doug today. He's gonna do an experiment about volcanoes. This is what a volcano is. This is, volcanoes they shoot lava and they're hot. Just giving them some like extra words of vocabulary so that they can participate in the lesson or the conversation that's going on.
Love that shout out to Mystery Doug. He's the best.
We love him.
We do that on our own at home.
It's like, and you want to engage, to that point, you want to engage them in like fun things like Mystery Doug, it's going to help keep everybody engaged. And then I think of the other group of students, or two groups of students that are really going to have difficulty with interactions over video chat are going to be our kids, especially the kids on the spectrum who have those social language deficits. So you have that one group that like just doesn't know how to socially like interject themselves into the conversation, because especially over video chat, there are no overt cues letting you know that it's your turn to talk. And if you're with one other person, it's pretty obvious, right? Because they stopped talking and now it's your turn. Great. But then when you're with a whole group, there are none of those cues. And so it's a lot harder to read. And so it's just kind of giving them maybe some sentence starters or some questions, like making up some questions that they can ask so that they're ready when they find an opening. And then you're going to have that group of students that is the opposite of that, who is just like the talker who wants to keep going. And because there are no overt social skills on a video chat or like social cues, they're not going to realize that their time should be up. And so it's just giving them like maybe a little tap on the shoulder. I have one parent who sets a timer that says, nope, you have like 1 minute to talk. And after that minute, you have to stop talking for 3 whole minutes and let other people talk.
Wow.
You know what? I bet you that strategy would be good in some Zoom meetings for, for adults.
Yep. Agreed.
Use that.
So I think it just depends on the student. But parents know their kids really well. So it's just thinking about like your kid and their needs, and then kind of coming up with the best strategy to help them. And, we're here to help always. You can always go to your kids' educational team. But if you're looking for quick ways to come up with stuff on your own, use what you have in your house. It'll be good.
And it's funny when you mentioned that about there is no overt social cues. I find that the more people you add to a Zoom call or some kind of virtual call, the harder it is to kind of filter that. So I would imagine for our students, it's even harder. So I know we keep saying keep the interaction small, don't have that many kids, and that ties right into why you would want to do that. You may have answered this a little bit already, but of those the three categories that you just mentioned, which would you think would have the most difficulty participating in a social interaction via a video chat? And what would you recommend to support those particular students?
I think students with, I think the two that'll have the most difficult time are going to be the students with the language deficits who like just are having a hard time understanding what the conversation's even about, just the language of it. And then I think the students who just really don't know how to insert themselves into the conversation are going to have a really hard time too, because they they want to participate and they just don't know how to do it in an appropriate way. There are going to be some visuals that you can download off of the IPP, I think the IPP website, possibly linked to our Facebook Live.
Yeah, we'll post them. Yep.
Yes.
So, I made a little card for some of our students with some sentence starters. So it's like, if I don't know what to say, I can ask a question, and it's got some question starters. I can make a comment, and it's got some comment starters. And then it says, if I don't want to say anything, it's okay. Because there are those students too who just want to sit and be part of the group, but they don't really feel comfortable saying it.
Right, definitely. Thank you. So what would be the 3 most important things that you would recommend to parents or teachers that they should think about when trying to promote some social interactions in this new time of everything, some kind of electronic platform?
I think, as Tiia mentioned, set those expectations, even if you aren't going to strictly enforce them. Just setting them is really important. We have a visual to go along with that too, something that you can kind of post over your computer to kind of help set those expectations, especially for our elementary kids. And then keep it structured, because if you have the interaction kind of centered around a game or activity or a video, it allows people of those varying levels of communication deficit a chance to participate. It kind of levels the playing field a little bit because it gives everyone kind of a set vocabulary to use.
Right.
And then I think, make sure to keep it fun, because if you, especially for kids who have difficulty communicating in general, the harder it is, the less likely they're going to want to do it again. So we want to make sure that they're really enjoying, the social interaction, whether it be via video chat or any other platform.
Thank you, Christina.
The one thing that I keep thinking about when you're talking, Christina, is that, probably thinking about my own daughter with this sort of thing is, what do you do when the kids just, no matter what, you could pull out all the fun things, you could be as planful, you could do as much as you want, and they don't want to do it. This is not a reinforcing activity for them. They are not motivated. And I think that idea of these short bursts, Tiia, that you talked about earlier, even if it's 30 seconds, or we talked last week about just being on the screen, or kind of, making this, just being near the screen a little bit more reinforcing. I know sometimes for me, if kids are having to be in distance learning classes, they may not want to do play dates on Zoom. Sometimes I don't want to do the social activities on Zoom because I'm in Zoom meetings all day, right? So we also have to take the kids where they are when it comes to that. This is a really great conversation. Do you guys have any other tips or anything else that you want to add before we close out for the day?
Liz, go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry. I was thinking just to what Christina was saying in terms of the expectations. It's so helpful. I ran a group and we didn't really, we're just getting used to it, getting in the swing of things. And I had a thought to just quickly show a visual, just share my screen of really a simple picture of, staying in your seat and just listening when others are talking. And it just made such a world of difference. I mean, we read a story. It wasn't anything too special, but just to have the little group just listen to the story, asking appropriate questions, and really taking turns asking the questions, it really made all the difference. And all I did was just show a little visual, and Christina's look wonderful. So something like that made a huge difference.
And I think you've done a nice job of setting up situations that kind of build the community, but don't necessarily require any actual social interactions. Like, what was your Flat Stanley version of the teacher called? Like, I thought that was brilliant.
Oh yeah, so there's this thing going around the internet that's called, it's like Flat Stanley, but it's called Flat Teacher. And so the teachers make a little Bitmoji of themselves, and then they mail themselves to the kids, and there's this cute poem and everything. I can't take credit. If you go online, it's probably all so teachers pay teachers. But so I made a little Bitmoji of myself, and I mailed myself to the kids' houses. And I know when I got it, I just got an email back from one of the kids using their parents saying that just said, "I miss you too." I didn't really know what he was talking about, but then I realized he got the flat Stanley or the flat teacher thing. And then they take pictures of me, myself, teacher, with them kind of doing different activities. So I got one of a kid watching and hanging out and watching TV, another one of them on a bike, and there's just me in the little front seat of their bike, just riding around.
I love it.
So I think it's
great.
really cute. I have some of my other staff that also work with them making their own versions, so I can mail those too. So just like you're saying, Katie, it doesn't require much back from them, but it's still something that I'm giving them that, you know, lets them know, okay, we're still here. And, you know, there's also an opportunity that everybody has it. So there's been comments where a kid has like brought me into a lesson and they're like, "Oh, is that Miss Fisher?" And I'm like, so it's just something little that you can do. And I think like Katie's been saying too is, and we've all been saying is like, are the kids happy and where are they? Like if they're not participating, it's okay if they're still kind of just sitting and they're smiling, or you really just want to check in and see how they're doing. And if they, you know, if they seem like they're still into it, don't worry about if they're like going back and forth with all these conversational turns. It's really just being there and knowing that you're still there for them, and that they still have all of these other friends there too in their classroom for them.
I think that's a perfect way to kind of end this conversation in terms of what we want is we want the kids to be happy, right? We talked a lot last week about this idea of the, you know, this is for some of the kids, they're sad and they're grieving kind of what they are not experiencing right now in school and being with their friends. And if whatever we can do, whatever we're trying to do, whether it's teaching skills or just trying to get kids to interact, it's their happiness that's most important. It's really difficult during this time. So I want to thank both Tiia and Christina for helping us out today and talking about some strategies to use for elementary school kids, elementary aged kids, or the young guys this week. I want to encourage all the people watching to tune in next week because we are going to have more experts at talking about middle and high school social interactions for kids in that age group, for middle and high school kids. And then following that, we're going to talk about transition onto adulthood for how to help with social interactions at these different age levels. So I encourage everyone to ask questions. What do you want to know? We'll do our best to come up with some solutions and some strategies for everybody to use. And once again, thank you all for joining us this morning, and a special shout out to Christina and Tiia for being with us. We enjoyed having you and hope you will come back again. And I think that's it for us on Coffee Talk. Unless anybody else has anything, we will sign off now. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.